Hi, Donna. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Krista. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you. So I always let my guests do a quick introduction about who they are and what they do, just a quick intro, and then we'll get into this interview together.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Donna Bond, and I'm a catalyst for personal transformation. I'm the founder of Consciousness Rising, and I spent 28 years as a corporate marketing executive. I had a spiritual awakening at the age of 44, and it was really significant because that was how old my father was when he died. And so
Mm.
suddenly I was in a really big rush to figure out what was happening in my life. And I really was unhappy in my corporate role, even though it looked like I had it all on the surface. I was really dying inside of myself. My spirit was dying. And on the advice of a psychic, I enrolled myself in a master's program in spiritual psychology at the University of Santa Monica. And I earned a master's in spiritual psychology with an emphasis of consciousness, health, and healing. And so today, my journey started a decade ago. I really focus on supporting women and the rise of the divine feminine that is happening on the planet right now, and really supporting women to reclaim their power, their truth, their divinity, and make a more meaningful contribution to the world as they're doing that.
Yeah, beautiful. We have lots and lots and lots of alumni from Santa Monica for that specific degree. So you are in really good company here. The next question is, I'm always curious about everybody's early childhood experience with religion and spirituality, or nothing at all, and then how they found themselves grounded in what they know today, because it's always very interesting. Most everyone who comes to the show is spiritual in some form. So what was that experience like for you growing up? And then tell us what you found on your journey.
Gosh, this is so funny. I've never been asked this question before, which is so interesting. So I'm Italian on both sides, and I grew up Roman Catholic, and we lived across the street from St. Dunstan's Church. And it was like, the right thing to do because we were right there. It was right across the street. And we all grew up Catholic. I went to catechism and CCD and all of that stuff. And I always remember when I was in church, I always had this feeling that I was uncomfortable. And as a young girl, like I couldn't really articulate what that was. I just knew it was a yucky feeling. A really significant moment for me, I was probably 16 years old, and I remember sitting on my bed in my room with my mother. And she kind of admitted to me that she didn't really like going to the church, and she didn't really necessarily believe in everything that the church was teaching and preaching.
How
And that
interesting.
was really significant for me because as a young girl, it was like that permission slip
Mm-hmm.
to explore what I knew was something that wasn't that was this direct relationship with the divine, this direct relationship with nature, with the universe, with my own energy, with my
Yeah.
own knowingness, right? And it was that permission to sort of step out of that intermediary that is the church, the permission to talk to God, which is so interesting. I guess maybe I was in my early 20s when I finally just said, why am I doing this? Why am I subscribing to something that doesn't feel aligned inside of me? And in 1989, I was on an airplane going on a business trip, and I remember reading Gary Zukav's book, The Seat of the Soul. And I was coming out of my skin so excited and elated that these ideas that I thought I held only inside of myself someone had written down in these pages. And, the poor guy who was sitting next to me on this airplane, I was poking, like he didn't even know who I was. And I was like, can you believe somebody wrote this stuff in a book? And that was all I needed. And from that day forward, I have grown in, my spirituality and the meaning of what spirituality is to me in my life, and this perpetual evolution that I'm in as a human being that is really on this epic adventure as a spiritual being.
Yeah, it is interesting to go back and look at those memories as an adult, and even with having gathered more tools in your life experience and through healing, and seeing like what your family would have been struggling with back then, and how interesting that your mom like admitted to you so young that she was, not necessarily, this is too strong of a word, but like of a crisis of consciousness, but like that she was like, I don't believe all of this. I would have been thrilled if my parents had said that to me. Been like, great, let's get out of here. Yeah. So you've done a lot of things. You've got a really robust business. You've also written a book. I have not read this book, but I thought we would at least tell the people what it is and what it's about. And then I have some specific questions about your work, but I did want to give you some space here to highlight the book that you have out.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my book is called Original Wisdome: Harness the Power of the Authentic You. And original wisdom, my definition of original wisdom, even though, I don't know that it's really something we can define, is this inherent intelligence in all beings that is rooted in unconditional love. And my journey has really been one of unlearning and untangling all of the belief systems that I have been conditioned with that have taken me away from this original wisdom. And this original wisdom is the truth of me. It's my essence. It's my soul. It is the highest aspect of who I am. And so in the book, I lead the reader through my own personal journey of transformation, of all of the awarenesses that I had as I figured out that all this wasn't all that. I had the big fat job. I worked for the highly prestigious company alongside best in class people, married to an incredible guy, lived in a beautiful home in Southern California.
You had the whole checklist.
I had the whole checklist, yet I still had this very deep void. I felt this deep lack of fulfillment. And, the older we get, the more we realize that void is never going to be filled through anything outside of us, including other people, like including our husband or boyfriend or spouse, or, even the parent-child relationship cannot fill this void. The only thing that can fill that void is our relationship with the divine and the relationship with our highest true nature, our highest essence. And so in my own personal discovery process of original wisdom, I suddenly became aware that I have so many more gifts and talents and abilities and wisdom that I have been completely overlooking in my life. And as I harness that and own it and embody it, my life gets more delicious and more juicy and more fun and more free and more abundant. And I really have gotten away from the entanglement of the physical world and the physical world laws that I was so encumbered with, and that we are all so encumbered with. And I have begun to align myself with universal law and the laws of the universe. And now I work with life instead of against life. You know, when the door opens, I see that as an invitation to walk through it rather than slamming my head against the wall over there just because I was told to. Yeah, it's amazing. You know, we all want to like be in the flow, but sometimes the most obvious invitations to be in that flow, we completely avoid and it eludes us. So my book is my own inner struggle, my own deep pain, and, you know, stories of not enough-ness that I had to work through as I let go of that corporate persona, let go of everything that I made that world mean, and how I completely reimagined myself, my life, the way I live, and my way of being in the world.
Yeah, it sounds like a really beautiful deconstruction story and how you basically came back to yourself. So we love those moments here on this podcast. I kind of want to uncover a little bit more about your life in corporate in the corporate world, because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are in their regular jobs, but they have this deep desire to cultivate their own consciousness and enlightenment. And I know in the corporate world, there is a lot of ego. There are places in businesses where there's a lot of ego and unconsciousness. And you, like you said, you rose through the ranks in the Ritz-Carlton brand. For you, where did you start noticing that sort of divergence of where like you couldn't really connect with that world anymore, and you came up against like a precipice of choosing to like stay in that kind of environment and then maybe go off and do something different? I'm really curious about that journey for you.
Well, to be completely honest with you, when I was in that environment, I didn't have the level of awareness that I have today.
Sure.
I wasn't relating to life or to people in the way that I do today, 10 years later. But what I will say, and what I know for sure, and where I feel so called to really support women who are still in that space,
Yeah.
is that's where the light is needed the most. And I love supporting women who are in these top positions, in these top roles, where they have a high level of influence. They have a high ripple effect. Because if we're going to affect real change in the world, we need to begin making different decisions. And when we can make those decisions from a higher altitude, we make different decisions, right? We make decisions that are more inclusive, decisions that encompass the whole, decisions that are more collaborative, that are more synergistic. And one of the trappings of that world is, and it's by no fault of anybody who's there. It's just like the nature of what has been created
Yeah.
is like every man for himself,
Yeah.
right?
It's the
Every
culture.
man for himself.
It's the culture of competition.
Right. The culture of competition. Exactly. And a rising tide floats all boats. And the oneness and the inclusivity of the world, which is shifting below our feet, whether we want to believe that or see that or know that, we see it everywhere, right? In these circles, people are waking up. People are waking up before my very eyes, where suddenly they're asking questions about how we do things and how things have been done in the past that don't feel compassionate, that don't feel kind, that don't feel inclusive, evolution cannot be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
But what's required there is an inordinate amount of courage to really stand forward in one's truth, in one's knowingness, in one's heart, and to be able to begin leadership from our heart space. One of the things that has helped me beyond helping me in all ways is to let go of logic. Like to let go of logic. And when I enrolled myself in a master's program in spiritual psychology, boy, it made no sense. None, zero, zip, nada. Because I was working 60 hours a week in a very demanding corporate role. I don't know how or why I thought I had time to go get a master's degree in a subject matter that had really nothing to do with my life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because of me following that inner nudge and that inner guidance and that inner pull. And this is where courage is really required. When all indicators say, take a left, and we make that right hand turn, something is happening there. Something is happening there. And so I really work with women to help them believe in themselves at the deepest level and really begin to follow the illogical patterns that are showing up in their life.
So another question I had is, you do a lot of work related to transformation and being able to have women become the fullest expression of themselves. I wondered if you could maybe talk about some very interesting themes that you see around barriers to expressing or fears that women and men may have to be able to be their fullest self. I know on the path of transformation, a lot of us feel scared to upset our families or cultural norms and things like that. So for you, when you're doing this work, what are some things that you're seeing, and how are you helping people combat those barriers or those fears in being able to express themselves?
Yeah, what a beautiful question, Krista. Thank you. It's not for the faint of heart. Let's be honest. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's not easy to look at ourselves. It's not easy to move into a place of full responsibility for the feelings that we're having, full responsibility for the thoughts that come into our mind, full responsibility for the energy that we give to those thoughts that then create an emotional response that then drive our behavior, right? There's so much connected to this. And it's one step at a time. And it's one gentle step at a time also. When I was in the corporate world, remember that term, bitch on wheels? I mean, that was me. Like, get out of my way. I have a mission, which belongs to some corporation, by the way, and I'm going to get it done no matter what, so I can look good. I was ruthless with myself. The inner critic that was in my head was relentless, and she was mean, and she was brutal. And
she usually is.
wow. I really want to acknowledge Dr. Mary Holnick from the University of Santa Monica, because she was the most exquisite example of compassion in action.
Absolutely.
And I had never in my life had that modeled for me in such a beautiful way. Now, she is no wallflower, right? Like, that woman is strong and fierce and grounded and focused and assured and confident. And she was so gentle and so loving and so tender. And I think there is really an invitation for all of us on the planet right now to begin being more gentle with our sweet selves.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a game changer for me. Like, this was an absolute game changer to do this level of work, to do this level of excavation that is required when we're journeying through a personal transformation. Takes the utmost care. It takes the utmost tenderness and compassion to be willing to admit our patterns of control,
Mm-hmm.
our shadow aspects of whatever they are.
Yeah. All the ways we try to control everything and all the stories we tell ourselves to keep ourselves safe and all those things.
Yeah. And so when we can first be gentle with ourselves, and I'm going to use a religious term, take ourselves off the cross. Because we put ourselves up on the cross, right? And we buy into this misbelief that we have to suffer, or that we
Yeah,
have to experience
1000%.
pain to then get some sort of a reward of
Mm-hmm.
goodness. Like, that feels like an undercurrent of a old misbelief
Yeah.
that we can begin to let go of. And
Mm-hmm.
so this sweetness that we can bring to our own process, and really seeing the journey that we make
Mm-hmm.
through the lens of reverence. I mean, holy shit, it is not easy to be human. It is not easy to sign up for planet Earth and to get a body and be here experiencing all of life.
Yeah. And waking up, like cultivating consciousness is a whole other master's level of work, And
Yes.
it's not like you said, it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, there's the being human, and then going on the spiritual path of transformation and enlightenment it's just a lot of work sometimes.
Well, I like to think about it as evolution. And I've been trying to break this terminology within my own
Mm-hmm.
consciousness of the work, right? That it has to be work. And all of the charge and the association that comes with that. We are evolving beings, and evolution will not, cannot, and does not go backwards, even though it might look like it sometimes. It can't and it
Correct.
doesn't. And because we are a living extension of life itself, we cannot go backwards. Now, can
Mm-hmm.
we stuck ourselves in the mud for a while? You betcha we can. So, the way I like to think about it and hold it in my mind is that I am constantly evolving. And as
Mm-hmm.
I am constantly evolving, I have a choice in what that evolution looks like. And I can
Mm-hmm.
choose to do that evolution or be in that evolution from a place of gentle kindness and tenderness and compassion, or the old ways of being of driving myself and forcing and pushing, and I'm going to say whipping because I'm doing this
Yeah.
action right
No,
now for
yeah.
whatever reason. Like,
Yeah.
this is what we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
It's,
Overly efforting and everything.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
overly efforting.
And I think in the master's path of I always say, like, when we get to this place, it's like master's and PhD, when you can break out of that consciousness, because the energy here in earth is so dense. But once I think you get to this place and you do stop efforting and you go with the flow, it does get easier. And I think that that's the promise of your own evolution and your own transformation, is like trusting yourself to get to that other place where you might have to be undoing a lot of things, and that can feel in that moment like very difficult and very cumbersome. But then you get to that other side, and there is this sort of, I would say, like this burst of ease that comes through you and allows you to continue in that ease instead of efforting so much.
Yeah, I hear you. That's so well said. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true.
Yeah,
It's
I wanted
true.
to ask you about inner knowing and accessing and getting it into it. You kind of mentioned at the top of our interview too that innate wisdom we have. I think one of the things that, especially in the feminine structure, our old paradigms that are breaking down and all of those things, there was this idea that like women had to be told how to live their lives, that didn't know who they were. And there's all these like, gross old paradigms that I certainly don't believe in anymore. But coming back into our own internal knowingness and wisdom is so wonderful and so exhilarating, and it's interesting to come back and trust yourself and really know what you need to do and what your next step is, and work with divine. So for you, what has that journey been like, accessing that part of yourself and helping other people access it?
We live in the land of duality. We live in the
Mm-hmm.
land of polarity. And these are the trappings. And I don't know if you follow the Enneagram at all. I'm a type 1 on the
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram, which is um, the shadow aspect of the perfectionist
Sure.
and the reformer. And so it's not pretty, but I hold a PhD in judgment, and having that PhD in judgment, and I mean self-judgment,
Mm-hmm.
is like we were talking about before, this like inner brutality.
Yeah.
But what has worked for me again and again, and I try to incorporate this into my life as much as possible, all of the time, is stepping out of those polarities, stepping
Mm-hmm.
out of the duality. Um, I like to say the most powerful person in the room is the person without a position, because that is the person that is at the center point, at the 0 point. And when we are at the center point, like I want you to just picture a triangle or a pyramid right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like on either end of that pyramid, on the bottom line, you have two extremes. You have like a positive and a negative. You have a good and a bad. You have a right and a wrong. And when we're trapped in either side of those polarities, we're going to suffer
Mm-hmm.
because we're fixated on our own position and we want things to be different. We want it to be a way that it's not. When we can come into the middle, the way of the middle, the center point, the 0 point. And, as we do this in our consciousness, it's not in the future and it's not in the past. It's right here, right now, in this present moment. And even as I talk about it, you and I are feeling it. We're feeling
Mm-hmm.
ourselves line up into that space and place of neutrality and of equanimity. And as
Mm-hmm.
I land myself in that place of neutrality, there's no friction, there's no resistance. And
Mm-hmm.
when there's no friction or resistance, I then rise up. I then have access to this inner knowingness, this divine nature, and all of the wisdom and the intelligence that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have created a place where it can flow into and through my consciousness.
Yeah.
Now, if I am pushing or striving or going, that doesn't happen. It can only
Mm-hmm.
happen when I pause. It can only happen when I sit back, not when I charge ahead. Now, Is there a place for charging ahead? Yes, because just as you said, we live in this super dense reality, right? And to move things forward in the physical world, action is required.
Yeah.
Action is
We
required.
still have to take action on things. Yes.
We do. We can't just dream it up and then sit on the couch because nothing's going to happen.
Yes.
But isn't there this place for the balance of the yin and the yang, of the go and the yield? And when I can come into a full stop and connect with my breath and slow down the directional chatter of the monkey mind, then I have a chance to begin to receive. And, you know, what I find with my clients and what I have found with my own process, and I'll check with you and see if you think this is true too, Krista, we always know. We always know. We can tell, you know, we play these stories like we pretend we don't know, or we say we don't know, but we always know. Now, we might not want to look. We might not be ready to tip over the apple cart in our life, you know, because sometimes when we look at the truth, it requires change. It requires action. And I live in Costa Rica, and this is absolutely not something that my personality picked, because I am a California girl all day long. I like high heel shoes and Louis Vuitton bags and Amazon deliveries, right? The universe went to great lengths to get me to live here in Costa Rica, and undeniable lengths, like the Red Sea parted and the sun and the moon and the stars aligned, and like a lot of crazy things happened to get me here. And I knew that I was being invited. I was being invited into something that I didn't know what it was. I couldn't define it. I couldn't articulate it. I did not know what it was. But I knew the signs, and I knew that there was this inner truth, even though it didn't make any sense. It didn't seem very logical on any scale, on anybody's plan. But I did it. I moved here. Moved my husband and 2 businesses here. We moved our entire life here. And it has been extraordinary for me. It has opened me up in even greater ways, spiritually, energetically, emotionally, physically. Like, I continue to go through just incredible transformation because I said yes to something that didn't make any sense. But I knew. So we can ignore those nudges and those callings. And that's okay, because we're ready when we're ready. And there's no need to make ourselves wrong for wherever we are on our journey. There is no destination to the journey of awakening. There is no destination. So if we can just let go of that idea and remember that it's about being where we are now, it's about loving our humanness, honoring and respecting and holding with reverence the journey that we make as a spiritual being on a human adventure, then we can land ourselves in that center point.
Yeah. I mean, I think the readiness piece is so critical, whether you're spiritual or not. And that takes a lot of self-awareness to understand it, because when you do confront those truths or the fact that change is needed or something requires a big movement in your life. I think not feeling ready and having compassion for that part of you that isn't ready is so critical in being able to take like that gentle approach you're talking about, because that's everything. And sometimes it's hard, especially if we're trying to pivot away from something really big, or we are on the brink of some big awakening, some major consciousness shift. It's a lot to open yourself up to all those things all at
Yes.
once. And having that patience and that compassion and that tolerance and that beautiful acceptance of yourself of where you at really helps, I think, aid in the smooth transition for a big transformation. So I love that you said that. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to give you some space here now to let everybody know like where they can connect with you, what kind of programs you have coming up, anything, speaking engagements, or anything that you have going on in your world in the next couple of months as people start listening to this show in a couple weeks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm going to be in Southern California leading a retreat in the month of October called Loving Your Sweet Self. And this is really designed for the women that we've been talking about, women who know that they're here to make a more meaningful contribution to the world, to make a difference and an impact in a bigger way, but they feel trapped and encumbered by the physical world, and they are really hard on themselves. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really hard on themselves. And, underneath that hardness is a story of not-enough-ness. And so this is about healing that self-doubt and that not-enough-ness, and being able to have an experience of our loving essence, our loving
Mm-hmm.
nature, our original wisdom. So that's coming up in October.
Right. Very cool. Well, I had a wonderful time with you today, and it was great to meet you and be able to talk to you and share your work and all of the wonderful things you're doing. So thank you so much for being here with me today, and I really appreciate you spending this time with me.
Thank you for having me, Krista.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Ziomara, in alignment with Light Casting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.